There comes a moment when pain stops being loud and becomes unavoidable. A moment where distraction no longer works, explanations feel empty, and silence feels heavier than noise. This is the moment that decides who you become next. Not everyone survives it the same way. Some harden, some disappear, but a few, quietly, painfully, begin to change. Because pain does not arrive to ruin you. It arrives to strip you down until only what is real remains. And if you stay present long enough, you will realize the hurt you're carrying right now is not the end of you. It is the beginning of your strength. There comes a moment when pain stops being loud and becomes heavy. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet weight that settles in your chest and refuses to leave. This is the moment most people break, but it is also the moment strength is born. Hurt doesn't announce its arrival with clarity. It slips in through betrayal, disappointment, abandonment, or silence where love once lived. And in that moment, when you realize something inside you has changed forever, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads to bitterness, resentment, and shrinking. The other leads to depth, awareness, and an unshakable inner power. Most people don't realize it, but the pain you're carrying right now is not here to destroy you. It's here to rebuild you from the inside out. Hurt has a way of stripping illusions. It removes the comfort of who you thought people were, the safety of what you assumed would last, and the version of yourself that believed effort alone could protect you. When pain enters your life, it doesn't ask permission. It rearranges your priorities, challenges your identity, and forces you to see clearly, sometimes for the first time. What once felt important suddenly feels hollow. What you tolerated before now feels unbearable. This is not weakness. This is the beginning of discernment. Strength does not start with confidence, it starts with clarity. And clarity almost always arrives through pain. Many people try to escape hurt by numbing it, staying busy, staying distracted, staying surrounded by noise. But true strength does not come from avoidance. It comes from staying present with the discomfort long enough to learn from it. Hurt reveals patterns. Who overgave, who stayed silent too long, who ignored intuition in exchange for approval. When you allow yourself to sit with pain instead of running from it, something powerful happens. You begin to see where you abandoned yourself, and that realization, though uncomfortable, becomes the blueprint for transformation. Pain humbles the ego while strengthening the soul. It teaches you that being strong doesn't mean being unbreakable. It means being adaptable. Hurt teaches you boundaries when words failed. It teaches self-respect when love was conditional. It teaches self-trust when promises were broken. This is why people who have suffered deeply often carry a calm presence. They don't rush, they don't beg, they don't explain themselves endlessly. They've learned that strength is not loud, it's grounded. And that grounding is forged through wounds that were survived, not avoided. There is a silent shift that happens when pain is processed instead of resisted. You stop seeking validation from those who couldn't protect you. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop chasing closure and start choosing peace. Hurt teaches you where your energy leaks and who benefits from your silence. As awareness grows, so does restraint. You begin to move differently, not hardened but honed, not closed but selective. This is the stage where pain begins to turn into wisdom, and wisdom quietly becomes strength. If you're hurting right now, it's not because you're weak. It's because you cared deeply. And caring deeply is not a flaw. It's raw material. Strength isn't about pretending the pain didn't affect you. It's about allowing it to shape you into someone who sees clearly, chooses deliberately, and stands firmly in their worth. This is where the transformation begins, not when the pain disappears, but when you stop letting it define you. What comes next is not softness, not bitterness, but a strength that cannot be shaken because it was built where you once thought you were breaking. After the initial shock of hurt fades, something quieter begins to happen beneath the surface. You start noticing that you are no longer the same person you were before the pain. Your reactions slow down, your tolerance for nonsense drops. The things that once triggered emotional spirals now only register as information. This is not emotional numbness, it is emotional intelligence forming. Pain doesn't just wound, it reprograms. It rearranges how you see yourself, how you interpret others, and what you're willing to accept. This is the stage where identity begins to shift, not because you chose to change, but because you had to. Before the hurt, you may have defined yourself by how much you gave, how patient you were, how understanding you could be. Pain exposes the cost of that identity. It shows you where compassion turned into self-neglect, where loyalty turned into self-betrayal, where silence turned into emotional debt. This realization is uncomfortable because it forces you to confront a truth most people avoid. You didn't just get hurt by others, you were hurt by the version of yourself that didn't know how to protect its own boundaries. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is where strength begins to grow inwardly. You stop introducing yourself through sacrifice and start recognizing your value independent of usefulness. You no longer measure worth by how much you endure or how much you fix. Pain teaches you that being needed is not the same as being respected. And with that understanding, your sense of self becomes quieter but stronger. You no longer feel the urge to over-explain, over-perform, or overextend. You begin to trust your inner signals, the discomfort, the hesitation, the subtle warning signs you once ignored. As pain rewires you, your emotional reflexes change. You no longer chase people who withdraw. You no longer prove yourself to those who doubt you. You no longer argue with those committed to misunderstanding you, not because you don't care, but because pain has taught you the cost of misplaced energy. Strength at this stage looks like restraint. It looks like pausing before reacting. It looks like choosing silence where you once chose explanation. This is not emotional shutdown, it is emotional sovereignty. There is also grief in this phase, the grief of losing who you were. You may miss the innocence, the openness, the version of yourself that believed intentions were always good and love was always safe. But grief is part of growth. You are not becoming colder, you are becoming clearer. Pain does not erase your capacity to love. It teaches you discernment. It teaches you that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, and that selective vulnerability is a form of self-respect, not fear. This is the moment when hurt stops feeling like an injury and starts feeling like initiation. You are no longer defined by what happened to you, but by what it awakened in you. Awareness replaces naivety, choice replaces reaction, self-trust replaces approval-seeking, and slowly, almost without noticing, you realize something powerful. You are no longer afraid of being hurt the same way again, because you are no longer the same person. The pain changed you, yes, but not into someone smaller, into someone stronger, sharper, and grounded from within. Once pain reshapes your inner world, it begins to change how you move through the outer one. Strength no longer feels like something you have to prove. It becomes something you practice. This is where boundaries stop being ideas and start becoming behavior. You don't announce them, you don't argue for them, you simply enforce them through consistency. Pain teaches you that people respond more to what you tolerate than to what you say. And so your strength becomes visible not in confrontation, but in quiet withdrawal from what no longer aligns. Discipline grows where emotional chaos once lived. You stop responding immediately. You stop giving access just because someone demands it. You stop chasing conversations that drain you. This discipline is not coldness, it's clarity. Hurt teaches you that your energy is a limited resource, and strength means choosing where it goes. You no longer feel guilty for stepping back, for saying no, for choosing peace over familiarity. Boundaries at this stage are not walls, they are filters. Pain also sharpens your perception of intention. You begin to notice patterns instead of promises, behavior instead of words. Strength teaches you to observe without attachment. You no longer rush to fill silence or fix tension. You let people reveal themselves through consistency or the lack of it. This is where many relationships quietly fall away, not because of conflict, but because alignment no longer exists. And instead of forcing connection, you choose self-respect. There is power in no longer reacting emotionally to everything. Hurt trains you to pause, to breathe, to choose your response instead of being driven by impulse. This emotional regulation becomes your shield. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain your pain. You don't need to defend your boundaries. Your calm becomes the message. And that calm, forged through discomfort, signals a strength that cannot be manipulated. At this stage, people may begin to notice a change in you. You're less available, less reactive, less eager to please. Some will respect it. Others will resist it. Pain teaches you to expect both. Strength means being okay with being misunderstood by those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You no longer negotiate your self-worth for acceptance. You allow distance to do the work that words never could. This is what it looks like when hurt becomes strength in motion. You choose yourself without apology. You protect your peace without explanation. You move with intention instead of emotion. The pain didn't harden you, it refined you. And now your presence carries weight, not because you demand it, but because you no longer give it away freely. Strength has stopped being something you talk about. It has become something you live. It becomes a stage where pain no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a teacher. This is the phase where you stop looking outward for emotional stability and start building it inwardly. You no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer crave external approval to feel secure. Strength at this level is internal autonomy. You become emotionally self-sufficient, not because you don't value connection, but because you no longer depend on it for identity. Before, your sense of worth may have been tied to how others treated you, how much attention you received, or how valued you felt in relationships. Pain breaks that attachment. It teaches you that external validation is unstable by nature. It rises and falls based on moods, agendas, and circumstances. When hurt transforms into strength, you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop asking people to confirm what you must decide for yourself. Your value becomes self-generated. This is where emotional detachment begins. Not indifference, but independence. You can care without clinging. You can love without losing yourself. You can walk away without hatred. Pain teaches you how to hold compassion without sacrificing self-respect. Strength here looks like calm acceptance instead of emotional bargaining. You stop forcing alignment. You stop chasing connection. You allow what aligns to stay and what doesn't to leave. You also stop trying to be understood by everyone. Hurt teaches you that clarity does not require consensus. Strength is knowing who you are without needing agreement. You become comfortable being misunderstood by those who only knew your old version. Your peace becomes more important than your image. Your alignment becomes more important than your reputation. And this inner stability creates a quiet confidence that cannot be shaken by opinions. Emotional independence also changes how you handle rejection and loss. You no longer see them as reflections of your worth, but as redirections of your path. Pain teaches you that not everything that leaves is a loss. Some exits are protection, some endings are alignment, some disappointments are filtering. Strength at this level is not resistance, it is acceptance with clarity. This is where hurt fully transforms into power. You are no longer anchored to what others think, feel, or choose. You are anchored to yourself. Your peace becomes your home, your boundaries become your safety, and your self-trust becomes your compass. You don't need validation, permission, or approval to stand firmly in who you are. And in that emotional independence, you discover a new kind of strength, one that doesn't demand control, doesn't seek attention, and doesn't fear loss, because it knows its source is internal, not external. There is a moment when pain stops asking why and starts asking what now. This is the turning point where hurt evolves into resilience. You no longer replay the past, searching for different outcomes. You no longer measure your growth by how much it hurt, but by how much you learned. Strength at this level is not about endurance, it's about direction. Pain becomes meaningful when it sharpens your sense of purpose instead of anchoring you to regret. Resilience is built in repetition. Each time you choose not to fall back into old patterns, you reinforce your strength. Each time you respond differently than you once would have, you reclaim your power. Pain teaches you how to rise without rushing, how to rebuild without bitterness. You begin to understand that healing is not linear, it's layered. And each layer adds depth, not weakness, to who you are becoming. At this stage, your pain begins to serve something greater than survival. It becomes perspective. You see through illusions faster. You recognize misalignment earlier. You sense energy shifts without needing proof. Strength gives you the ability to walk away before damage occurs. You no longer need the lesson to repeat itself louder. Pain has trained your awareness to listen the first time. Purpose often emerges from what once wounded you. You become a source of clarity, calm, or strength for others, not by preaching, but by presence. People feel grounded around you because you are grounded within yourself. Pain teaches you empathy without enabling, compassion without self-sacrifice. Your experiences refine your intuition and shape your contribution. Strength here is no longer reactive, it's generative. You also begin to trust timing differently. Hurt teaches you patience, not as waiting, but as alignment. You stop forcing outcomes, you stop rushing healing. You allow life to meet you where you are, instead of chasing what you think should be. Strength learns when to move and when to remain still. This discernment is one of the greatest gifts pain can offer. This is where pain becomes integrated, not erased. It lives within you as knowledge, not as weight. You don't deny what happened, but you no longer carry it as a burden. You carry it as proof of resilience, proof of growth, proof that what once tried to break you ended up shaping you instead. Strength at this level is quiet, purposeful, and deeply rooted. You are no longer surviving the pain, you are using it to walk forward with intention. There comes a point where pain no longer needs your attention to teach you. It has already done its work. What once demanded emotional energy now exists quietly in the background, no longer controlling your reactions or decisions. This is integration, the moment when hurt fully becomes strength. You don't relive the pain, you don't explain it, you don't seek justice or validation for it. You simply move forward, carrying the wisdom it gave you without the weight it once imposed. At this stage, your strength is no longer situational. It doesn't depend on who stays, who leaves, who approves, or who understands. It is stable because it was built internally. Pain taught you self-regulation, emotional balance, and grounded awareness. You no longer fear loss because you no longer abandon yourself. Strength is knowing that no matter what changes externally, your center remains intact. You begin to move through life with quiet authority, not dominance, presence. You don't chase control because you've mastered restraint. You don't seek attention because you know your value. Pain refined your character, softened your ego, and sharpened your intuition. This combination creates a calm confidence that speaks without words. People may sense it, but they won't always understand it, and you no longer need them to. Integration also brings forgiveness, not as permission for what happened, but as release for yourself. You forgive not to reconcile, not to forget, but to free your energy from the past. Pain teaches you that holding on is heavier than letting go. Strength is choosing peace without reopening wounds. You don't rewrite the past, you reclaim the present. This final form of strength is deeply grounded. You trust yourself. You trust your discernment. You trust your boundaries. You no longer second-guess your intuition or minimize your experiences. Pain taught you to listen inwardly and move accordingly. You are no longer shaped by fear of being hurt again. You are guided by self-respect and clarity. What once hurt you did not disappear, it transformed. It became wisdom in your choices, steadiness in your presence, and strength in your silence. You are not hardened, closed, or guarded. You are anchored, and that anchoring allows you to stand firm without resistance, love without self-betrayal, and move forward without carrying the past. This is the quiet victory few talk about, the moment when pain finishes its work and leaves behind something unbreakable.